Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
One day, my father, my cousin, and I were at a gardening store to buy some pieces to repair a sprinkler system. They were small items. We find what we need, but one of them had the tag scratched and for sure won't scan at the checkout. I said we have to find one with a proper tag, but my father said there's no need. He takes the tag off and puts the item in his pocket. Me and my cousin look at each other like, what the heck? When asked, my father said they won't even notice it. Since it had no tag, it wouldn't activate the alarm at the entrance. 2 things you need to know going forward. My cousin is a police officer fresh out of the academy. My father has always had an attitude of superiority towards the children of the family. Something like, I'm your father, uncle, etc. You won't dare cross me, no matter if we're already adults with jobs in our own homes. So my cousin asks if he realizes he could have him arrested for this, to which he responds by laughing, and then he says he dares him to do it. We walk towards the registers, and while waiting in line, my cousin whispers in my ear, "You know what I'm about to do, right?" To which I reply, yes. He waited for my father to pay for the stuff he wanted to pay for and go past the alarm sensors so that the theft would be official and not just intent. Then he started acting like a policeman. He presented himself as off-duty police, badge number, etc., loud and clear so that people would hear. Then he asked my dad to empty his pockets. A puzzled look covers my dad's face at this point. Security comes to check what's going on, and my cousin explains that he, an off-duty officer, witnessed that man putting an object in his pocket and did not pay for it. Security also asked him to empty his pockets, and there it is, the item he stole. Security detains my dad and calls 911. Police officers came and took my dad away after confirming the story with the security footage. He spent the night in jail and got hit with a fine. After that, he stopped acting like the king of the family's hill, and this would be something to laugh at for years to come. A while ago, I was working in a nursery home. I was responsible for everything HER and PR-wise, responsible for the internal and external communication, answering of questions on the phone, mail, or people that just popped in whenever they wanted. I was responsible for ordering material and doing the general administration, for preparing and evaluating everything that had to do with the politics that were involved. Long story short, I was already doing the work of around 5 full-time employees. On top of that, it was also my first job in HER, and my boss knew so. At first, she was pretty nice, and we could have good talks about the work pressure that she acknowledged was crazy, for her as well. Soon the real cracks started to show, though. Not only couldn't she help me with any of the questions I had about my job, she was asking me questions on the daily about tasks that she was supposedly doing for 20 years. I didn't understand how she didn't already know those tasks by heart, and that I, without knowledge of the history or the software, should be supposed to help her. What baffled me even more is that after barely a month, I was actually more fluent in those tasks than she was after all that time. On top of my own tasks, I was helping her with her tasks, meaning that she demanded that I came sit next to her for half a day and tell her how to do her tasks. When I said I could just do them for her, because that would actually take me less time than pointing and dictating to her what she should do, she always denied it, because she somehow still felt like she was the one getting her job done. After 1 month, she started taking extended holidays as well. Was barely at work for 30 of the time, and when she was working, she usually was tackling the people managing part of her job. Meaning, she would just walk around the nursery home and she would have cozy talks with the clients, their family, and the nurses instead of actually contributing to her job, leaving me completely to my own devices in a new job, taking on her workload and cleaning up her messes as well. Whenever something wasn't going according to the plan and I told her, she just went like, "Oh, I know how busy it is," but then never actually doing something about it. After the plan then went to crap, she was there to talk to me about my mistakes though, and how I needed to fix them immediately. One day, after she had been on holiday for 2 entire weeks, she needed to talk to me about a mistake I had made with the payment of one of our employees. She told me how the nurse had told her that I didn't put her sick days on the pay slip. I told her that I indeed hadn't, since the input of the calendar always happens a week before the end of the month, because otherwise you can't have people paid on the last day of the month, and the nurse had gotten sick in those last 3 days of the month. I don't have a magic ball that can tell me when people are going to be sick in the future, and I thought that explanation should be clear. But she kept repeating that I had made a mistake not putting those sick days in her calendar. Oftentimes, she would reprimand me on something I had repeatedly and explicitly warned her for before. But somehow, the blame was always put on me. And that was also the message she gave the nurses, who then started to treat me like crap as well. I quit and told my story in my exit interview. A week after I left, my boss fell into burnout because suddenly she had to do her own job and didn't know how to, and didn't have anyone to tell her how to. Temporary management took over and saw what kind of delusional stuff had been going on for the past 20 years in my boss's management. She got fired for it, as it turned out she had always been putting the blame on her employees, while she was the one incapable of her job. Names are changed. A friend of mine I have known for decades, James, has a son, Roy, with his ex Lisa. Lisa has a new live-in boyfriend, David, with his own kids and one on the way. Although not blood-related, Roy is my nephew. James has shared custody with Lisa as primary. Roy is 17, a year ahead in school, and a straight-A student. After obtaining his driver's license, Lisa agreed he can work for me at my company. James bought Roy a used car to drive to school and work. Kid really hasn't come into the hangout life yet. Recently, it was brought to my and James's attention that David has been driving the car and allowing his 18-year son to drive it as well. This is against the agreement for the car and has been causing Roy to have to find or wait for rides to school and work. James confronted Lisa and David, which caused a huge fight and legal threats on both sides. James and Roy installed a tracker on the car after telling David that only Roy can drive the car and anyone else who takes it will be arrested, as the car is still in James' name. David took the car after this and was stopped and arrested for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. David retaliates by convincing Lisa that Roy should not be able to drive the car unless they are in the car, or he is running an errand for them. The courts agreed that this is within their rights on the weeks mom hasn't. Lisa is aware that he needs to drive while working, but still won't let him use the car, but has him driving the other kids to their events. So after talking to Roy and James, we developed a plan. James took the car back. I own a rental house not too far from Lisa's. Since it is currently used for short-term rentals, I moved a car I had wrapped for my company to the house and gave the key and garage code to Roy. Roy currently picks up the car on the way to school and after school takes it for work. As the car is wrapped with logos, I pay him for driving to school and school events and to drop the car off on the way home. Now, David has to fix his schedule to deal with trekking his kids back and forth, and Roy can get where he needs to. Roy's happy he can work more and no longer has to be the family's unpaid Uber. Edit for clarification. UUMV is a misdemeanor where we live. The way it was explained to me was a step under auto theft, used for when they can't prove the car wasn't going to be returned. Story starts out when I was 8. I was 8 years old and moved from the great outdoors of Canada, down south to the hot weather of Texas. My dad was a manager of an oil refinery and he got a better position as a whole sector manager. I was 8 and I was about in 2nd or 3rd grade. Give or take. I wasn't informed of me moving until one day my mom went to school with me and checked me out. I had a couple good friends and a lot of family in Canada that I had to leave. After going on the plane the first time ever, I was so ecstatic my mother said I passed out. So when we came to Texas, we had a big house. In Canada, we had an apartment in the city. In Texas, we had a nice grand big house with a front yard, 6 bedrooms. I was so happy that I almost forgot I had school next week and had no friends. For anyone who has seen King of the Hill, imagine the houses being lined up. All the neighbors were really close. Our neighbor was a cop, and he had an 8-year-old son named Jonathan. Jonathan and I became best friends, and when school started after summer, he showed me around and helped me a lot. Though Jonathan told me to stay away from a boy named Ken. Ken was the school bully. He would just go around and bully kids because he wanted to. I was about 3'5" at the time. I was short. Ken was a whopping 4'2". Ken basically had 7 inches on me and 50 pounds. I was super scrawny compared to Ken. First day I got to school, I had one of the best teachers I ever had growing up. Her name was Miss Maddie. Miss Maddie was about 40 years old, though real nice. She would stay after school, help students give students bus money if they needed it. It turned out Ken and I were both in Miss Maddie's class. On the first day of school, I didn't know who Ken was, though I saw some tall kid in a black shirt. I made eye contact with him. He turned and snapped, saying, "What do you want?" R-worded. I never heard those words ever in my life, and I remembered these words like yesterday. They are scarred into my head. So the year went on, and in February is where the bullying started happening. I was on the swing set, and Ken just came and pushed me off. I fell into the sand face first. He and his buddies were laughing. His buddies tagged along with him because they were mostly scared of him. I came home and told my dad. My dad told my principal, though the principal turned out to be Ken's father's mother-in-law. Of course, she would not get Ken into trouble. The principal simply told my dad, "No evidence equals no proof." My dad was furious, and he had a teacher meeting arranged with Ms. Maddie, and Miss Maddie said she will keep an eye out. So the bullying happened every day. Jonathan witnessed and helped me push off Ken one time. Now Jonathan got himself into this. Well, I almost forgot Jonathan's dad was a cop. I went to Jonathan's dad one time while he was working on his beautiful red '97 Ford Mustang. I explained to him and explained that the principal won't do anything and such. I told him Jonathan is also on Ken's target list. Basically, Mr. White, Jonathan's dad, told me that I should set up a sting. Well, I didn't know what that was, so he explained to me and I followed. Mr. White told me that he and his partner in child services would be looking through an identified car, and if they see me getting harassed, they will come and arrest Ken for excessive bullying, harassment, assault, etc. So I explained to Jonathan, and Jonathan and I made a plan and told Mr. White what was going to happen. The next day I saw Ken walking up to me and Jonathan, so we both quickly ran past him while saying something out loud. The phrase we said was, "Meet me at the back alley of Corner Street. I'll trade you the shiny Pokemon card." Pokemon cards in the school went for quite a bit of money. I knew Ken wanted that card and would do anything to get his hands on it. So I had the card, and Jonathan and I met up at Corner Street at 5 p.m. Guess who comes along at 5:10? Ken and his buddies. Basically, they walked up, and one of his buddies said, "Hey, give me the card and no one gets hurt." We saw a white pickup pull up and just quietly turn off their engines. No one noticed, not even Jonathan. I said, "No, this is my card. You've been bullying me all year. Screw off." He replied to me, "Give me the card or I will break your arm." I said no with a smirk on my face. Ken ran up with his buddies and headbutted me. Mr. White, his partner, and a child services worker jumped out of the car and rushed to the scene. They put handcuffs on Ken and his buddies and sat them down at the curb while their parents came. Ken's buddies started crying, saying that he made them do it, and they just kept crying. Mr. White wasn't going to arrest them. He was going to scare them so they would never bully again. Then Ken started crying, saying how he's sorry and he will never bully again. They bring in a squad car, load them up, and take them to juvie. Mr. White told me this after it happened. In juvie, they put them in a holding cell, scaring the living crap out of them. Ken and all his buddies were crying for forgiveness. Then Mr. White led them. They're still handcuffed around juvie and showing them what kinds of kids are there. And if they wanted to join them, they started crying again. Then all their parents came, picked them up. The principal was put under investigation for allowing students to get bullied, and Ken moved places. Ken's buddies then in middle school and high school became straight as students and were friendly with everyone. Moral of the story: don't bully my friends and I. This happened last night. I have terrible neighbors. They like to get drunk and fight. They will fight anyone, each other, or even come after my children or myself. Well, last night was no exception. They were getting rowdy and hollering. I am so sick of it. They were throwing stuff into the road, playing in traffic, screaming, making a scene. I'm not feeling great, so I was in bed with the window open. I turned on my lamp, got up to the window to close it, and they saw me. Of course, that started a new round of yelling obscenities at me. I just shook my head. The window is quite big and heavy, and like I said, it is not feeling great, so it was taking some time to close. She yells something along the lines of, "You enjoying this show? Why don't you record this? Your security cameras are not working. Why don't you call the police if you really want to see a show?" I had no intention of involving myself. I just wanted to not hear them. But then I remembered my internet was down and my security cameras weren't working at the moment. So I propped up a spare phone on my window and started recording while I called the police. per their request. I gave the police a play-by-play, which they could clearly hear in the background, their names and the address. Within a few short minutes, there were several police cars surrounding their place and mine. The woman ran inside to hide. The man ran to his van to drive off, and the two children were roaming my front yard in just their underwear. I knew they had small children, but had assumed they were in bed because I hadn't seen or heard them. Did I mention it was 10 p.m. and raining? Police took them all away. Kids were loaded up as well. This isn't the first time, but I was really hoping it was the last time, at least for the kids' sake.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.